The sky over Earth was calm and dark, with only a few stars blinking in the night. Above the space station, floating silently in orbit, a silver dot between the stars, a small crew inside, worked their quiet shifts, watching screens and listening to. Empty static, it had been months since anything strange happened, and they liked it that way. No news meant no danger, no surprise, but tonight something changed. The buzzing sound came first, low and soft, like a whisper in the walls. One of the engineers turned her head and frowned, tapping her headset, thinking it was just a glitch. Maybe the signal from Earth was bouncing weird again, but then the buzz grew louder, deeper, almost like a voice hiding inside noise. She called for the commander, who walked in, holding his coffee and yawning, but when he heard it, he stopped. He put the cup down slowly and stared at the main screen numbers. Started to shift lines of strange code, began to appear letters and shapes no one on Earth had ever seen before. Symbols that looked alive. The screen flickered, and the lights dimmed. Something was coming through the radio channel, something not made by human hands. They called the science officer, who rushed in with his translator program, typing fast to decode the symbols. The room filled with tension, breaths held, fingers frozen. Then suddenly the static vanished, replaced by a clear message in simple words that made the whole room freeze in fear and confusion. Help us, it said. The Queen is dying. We need Dr. Lewis. No one moved. The name echoed in the silence over and over again. Who was Dr. Lewis? Why would aliens know a human doctor? How did they even learn his name? And why send the message now? Why send it to a peaceful Earth station instead of a government channel? Nothing made sense, but the voice was real, and it sounded desperate, scared, broken. They contacted Earth Command, and within minutes every satellite turned to listen. Every lab and secret bunker was alerted. People ran through halls carrying the message, trying to make sense of it. Every doctor named Lewis was checked, but only one stood out: an old medical researcher named Dr. Adam Lewis, who once studied rare viruses and strange immune systems, but had retired long ago. He lived alone on the edge of the desert, surrounded by dust and silence. No one had spoken to him in years. Not since his wife passed away, and he left the labs behind. His name had faded from news, from books, from the world, and yet somehow out there in space, dying. Alien Queen knew him. A black car drove through the desert and stopped at his door. Men in suits stepped out and knocked. They showed him the message and watched. His eyes grew wide. His hands shook as he read it again and again. Then he looked up and said just one word: impossible. But it was real. Within an hour, he was on a ship flying into orbit, heading for the space station. Where the message first arrived, people stared at him like he was some kind of legend or ghost, a forgotten name now brought back into the light. He didn't speak much, only watched the stars through the window, thinking about the voice, thinking about what kind of being could sound so human yet not be human at all. When the ship docked, the crew met him with quiet eyes and led him to the control room. The voice came again, softer now, like it was fading, but still clear. Help us, please. The Queen has days, maybe hours. We have no cure. Only you can help. Lewis asked them to play it again and again. He listened to every tone, every pause, every breath. There was pain in that voice, deep pain. Not just physical, but something more, a feeling he could not describe. And for the first time in years, he felt something inside him awaken, not just curiosity, but purpose. He asked for every tool he used to work with, every file on alien biology, every sample, every note, anything that might help him prepare. The crew obeyed without question. The message had shed some to made them feel small and helpless, like children staring into the dark, not knowing what waited there. And then came the second message, a new voice, deeper, louder, more angry. We are coming, it said. Prepare the doctor. Do not try to hide him, or we will take him ourselves. Panic spread through the station like fire. Some wanted to run, others wanted to hide, but Dr. Lewis stood still, staring at the screen, his hands calm, his eyes clear. He knew now that this was no accident, no random call. This was a mission, a warning, and a request all in one, and he was the center of it. The commander asked him if he was ready to meet them, to face whatever came through those stars. And Dr. Lewis only nodded, then said quietly, they came all this way for me. I will not let them down. Far out in the dark, a shape moved closer. Through space, bigger than anything the station had ever seen, a ship, like a shadow blocking out stars. A deep hum vibrating through every wall. The aliens were coming and time was running out. And the Queen was dying. Asterisk. The sun rose over the desert with a burning light that turned the sand gold and red. And the sky above was quiet. At first, no clouds, no sound, just wind sweeping across dry rocks and broken land. But then came the rumble, a deep echo from beyond the horizon, like thunder trapped inside. Metal, like something waking from sleep and stretching across the sky. People ran out of the military base, shielding their eyes from the glare. As something massive came into view, something black and smooth and silent, a shape that moved without wings. A ship unlike anything seen before, not spinning, not roaring, just floating with cold power through the morning light. It moved above. Then, like a mountain in the sky blocking the sun and turning day into shadow, soldiers raised their weapons and took positions while alarms screamed and orders flew through radios, but no one fired, not yet, not until they knew what this was, not until. They saw the strange glowing symbols sliding across the belly of the alien craft, words or warnings or names. No. One could read, and then came the beam, a white beam, from the bottom of the ship that touched the ground with perfect stillness and made the earth shake softly, like it was afraid. From inside the beam they appeared tall figures step down from the light, dressed in armor that looked like bone and glass, with long arms and sharp faces and eyes that seemed to glow without color. 5 of them walked in silence, carrying something between them, something wrapped in pale cloth, something large, and breathing slowly. The guards formed a circle around it, and the lead one stepped forward with one hand raised and spoke. "Bring us the doctor." His voice was deep and not fully human, like metal mixed with wind, like it had been shaped by machines. And Fire, the commander of the base, tried to speak, tried to ask questions, but the alien raised his hand again and repeated the words. "Bring us the doctor, bring us Dr. Lewis now, or the Queen will die and we will burn this place into dust." The guards opened the cloth and showed her the Queen. Her skin shimmered with strange colors, changing like liquid gold and blue and silver. Her face was thin and sharp with long lines across her cheeks, glowing softly. Her eyes were closed, her chest moved slowly, her body twitching, as if in pain. Her breathing was weak and wrong, and even without understanding her biology, everyone could see she was dying. Dr. Lewis stepped forward slowly from the edge of the crowd, wearing his old lab coat and carrying a case of tools he had not touched in years. His eyes locked onto her face, and he saw something he had only seen once before. A patient with a rare Earth disease long ago, something that twisted the blood from the inside and turned the body against itself. Something impossible to treat without taking terrible risks. Said nothing, just walked forward until he stood over, looking down at a creature not from this world, not from any world he had known, and yet he saw something familiar in her pain, something human in her suffering, and he reached out and touched her forehead gently as the alien guards tensed, ready to strike. But the Queen opened her eyes for 1 second and looked at him and whispered something too soft to hear. "Take her inside." Now Dr. Lewis spoke loud and clear, and the aliens obeyed without question, carrying her toward the medical chamber prepared just for this moment. He followed them with steady steps, while soldiers and scientists watched in stunned silence, unsure who was really in charge anymore, unsure what would happen next inside. The chamber lights flickered and screens buzzed as alien machines hummed in the corners, and scanners floated around the Queen, reading her life signs, drawing maps of her body that looked like living fire. Dr. Lewis stood in the center of it all, surrounded by tech he did not know but trusted his instincts, his eyes reading, or like a puzzle, his fingers moving like they remembered every cut, every stitch, every risk. He asked for her blood, a sample taken by one of the alien medics with a tool shaped like a blade of light, and when he placed it under the Earth microscope, he saw something that made his breath stop. The blood was alive, not just with cells, but with something else, something moving inside it. Not a virus, not a parasite, not a bacterium, but something intelligent, something aware. It was feeding on her faster than any disease he had ever seen, and yet it reacted to his movements as if watching him, as if learning from him, as if mocking him. He realized then that this was no ordinary illness. It was an attack, something sent to kill her from within, and it was winning. Guards asked if he could save her, and he said maybe, but not with their tools, not with their rules. He would need time, freedom, and something more, something human. Lead alien nodded and placed a strange device in Dr. Lewis's hand, a cube glowing with soft light, and said, "This is knowledge from our best healers. Learn from it, use it, and save her, or everything you know will burn And then the queen whispered again, her voice shaking. Please, turned back to her and nodded once, then said, I will not let you die. And the work began. The lights inside the chamber dimmed to a cold blue as machines clicked and spun around the queen, who now lay still on the glowing table. Her breathing shallow and thin, the air smelled like metal and burning ozone, and every second felt heavier. Then the last, as if time itself was holding its breath, watching what would happen next year. Lewis stood alone in the middle of the room, surrounded by strange tools that hummed and floated, some of them scanning her body in pulses of light, others whispering numbers into the air he could not understand, but he kept his focus sharp, his hands steady, his mind open to every detail. He picked up a long, clear needle filled with her blood and placed it under the microscope, an Earth device that still worked better than the alien ones for things he needed to see with his own eyes. What he saw made his heart race. The blood was moving, not like it should not with normal flow or cell drift. It moved with purpose, with patterns. It danced and twitched and swirled as if alive inside every drop with something dark, something twisting and stretching like tiny vines crawling through her veins. It pulsed in rhythm, but not with her heartbeat. It had its own beat, and it was fast. He leaned in closer, watching. As the red and silver liquid stretched, then snapped, then grew again, forming shapes, then breaking them, then rebuilding. Always moving, always learning, he reached for a stronger lens to zoom in more. And what he saw there chilled him to his core. There were no cells left, only machines, microscopic, things that crawled through the blood with sharp edges and glowing cores, creatures made not of flesh or bone, but of metal and light, something built, not born, something programmed, not evolved. He whispered to himself, it's a hive, it's a swarm, and it was killing her from the inside. He stepped back, trying to make sense of it, his thoughts racing through every book, every note, every memory from his years in medicine and research. This was not a virus, not a poison. This was something new. Something that behaved like a disease, but was not. It was artificial. It was a weapon, one designed to look like sickness, but act with intelligence. He turned to the alien guard near the door and asked when it started, when she first showed signs. The guard replied that she had collapsed after speaking at a peace council 3 cycles ago. It had not awakened fully since then. Her skin began to lose color. Her strength faded. Her body rejected food. And rest and nothing their healers tried made any difference, dear Lewis. Asked if she had any enemies, and the guard hesitated before nodding, slowly saying only that many did not wish for peace, that some within the empire wanted war and chaos, and would do anything to get it, even murder their queen in silence. Turned back to the blood and took another sample, placing it inside one of the alien machines, a floating sphere that scanned it, with light beams and projected data across the walls. Numbers, graphs, symbols he could not read until the machine translated for him, and what it said was even worse than he feared, self-replicating. Nanotech code unstable, no known origin, destructive intent confirmed, no cure detected, it was made to kill. And made to Hyder, Lewis clenched his fists and stared at the projection longer than he should. The queen was strong, but even she had only days left. If this thing inside her was growing, learning, adapting with every heartbeat, and it would not stop, not unless he found a way to break I remembered something from long ago, a human experiment, one shut down because it was too dangerous, a therapy using electromagnetic pulses to disable smart cells in cancer treatment, but it was unstable and banned after it caused heart failure in test patients. But if this enemy was mechanical, if it had code and current, maybe it could work. Maybe it was her only chance. He asked the aliens for a pulse device, something that could send controlled bursts of energy through her bloodstream, something small and precise enough not to destroy her heart. They looked at each other, unsure. But the lead guard stepped forward and opened a case, a box of ancient tech, banned even in their Empire tools. Made for war, not healing, dear Lewis took it and examined the device, a tiny silver ring with a spinning core and soft blue glow. He placed it on her wrist and connected it to her skin. The light blinked, then turned green, then red, then green again, ready to fire, ready to begin. He looked at her face, peaceful now, but fading too fast, her lips barely moving, her eyes still closed, and he felt something inside, His chest something heavy and deep and full of purpose. He could not let this creature die not. Because of fear, not because of silence, not because of some coward hiding in shadows. He turned on the machine. The pulse fired once, then again her body jerked, slightly each time, muscles twitching as the nanotech inside her began to react. Twisting and breaking in patterns it could not hold, the blood swirled under the skin, turning darker, then lighter, then darker again. Until finally the movement slowed just for a moment, just enough to see that it was working. He stepped back, breathing hard, watching her chest rise just a little stronger than before the first sign of a fight, the first sign of hope, and then the chamber lights flickered. The machines beeped louder, and the queen opened her eyes, asterisk. Her eyes opened, slowly glowing like moons behind a fog of pain and confusion, her breath uneven, her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came, only a faint sound like wind passing through metal. Her gaze found D.R. Lewis standing over her, his face tense, his hand shaking slightly, not from fear, but from what he had just seen, from what he had just done something few on Earth would ever believe. He had weakened the swarm inside her, slowed it, maybe even hurt it, but not destroyed it, and he knew. Now that it would fight back smarter, meaner, stronger, the longer it lived inside her, the more it would learn, and soon it would begin to hide again, or worse, strike at her heart in one final blow. And if that happened, there would be no second chance. Turned to the alien guards and asked for time, asked for space, asked for quiet, and they gave it to him with nods and silence. But outside that room, the world was already moving against him, far away in a hidden chamber, deep within the Queen's own ship. A group of alien commanders argued in low voices, their bodies cloaked in light armor, their faces hidden by helmets marked with black symbols. They spoke in a language not meant for human ears, but their intent was clear. They did not want the Queen to survive. She had ruled with mercy. They said she had listened to the weak. She had made peace with enemies, and now she was paying for it, lying broken on the human table. Poisoned from within, and they blamed her for every part of it. They blamed her for trusting outsiders, for allowing Earth to live when it should have burned, and for calling a human doctor to fix a problem their empire should have solved with fire. One of them, a tall figure with golden armor and a deep voice, whispered that the cure would be her death, that if she woke and spoke again, she would name those who betrayed her. She would break their power in hand. Control back to peacekeepers and diplomats and thinkers, and they could not allow that. He opened a small black case and showed the others a thin needle filled with green liquid, something ancient, something violent, something final, if injected it would stop the Queen's heart in seconds and leave no trace, no mark, no clue, it would look like. The swarm had won. The others nodded slowly and said the human must not see it happen. The human must be distracted or removed. He is too clever, too curious, too dangerous, and the people already whisper of him as a healer from the stars, as the one who answered when no one else would they fear what might happen if the Queen lives, and praises him before the Empire back at the medical room. D.R. Lewis stared at a screen full of data alien symbols flowing like rivers across the glass numbers. He had learned to read over the past hours and patterns. He now understood with frightening clarity. The swarm had not just invaded her blood. It had changed her cells. It had begun to rewrite her body from the inside out if it finished the process. She would not be Queen anymore. She would be something new, something cold, something not alive. He spoke softly to the Queen, telling her what he found, telling her what he feared. Her eyes never left his face, even as her breathing slowed and her fingers trembled against the edge of the bed. She nodded once, barely moving, and whispered the name of the traitor into his ear, a name that made the guards shift and look at each other in shock. Dora Lewis stood quickly and demanded protection, demanded a secure location, demanded that the Queen be moved now before it was too late, before the enemy struck from inside their own ranks. But before the guards could move, the lights went out and a deep sound echoed through the halls like thunder cracking through steel explosion screams. The station shook as fire bloomed in the western wing. Alarms screamed through the dark. Red lights flashing as soldiers ran through smoke and sparks, and the Queen's ship began to rise from the desert, lifting into the sky. Without orders, without command, it had been hijacked. D.R. Lewis grabbed the emergency kit and stood over the Queen, his body blocking her from the door, his voice calm as he gave orders to the guards who looked lost, who looked afraid. He told them to follow the backup plan, the one no one wanted to use, the one that required escape and hiding in silence. They carried the queen through dark tunnels beneath the base baths built long ago for war, now used for survival, her breath slow but steady, her eyes still open, still watching, as if waiting for something more above them. The traitors searched the halls, Lewis calling for blood, promising reward for anyone who delivered the doctor dead or alive, but they were too late, the human. And the queen were gone into the desert. They fled beneath stars that no longer felt safe, and as the cold wind howled across sand and stone, Dr. Lewis knew the truth. The queen was not just dying, she had been hunted, and now so was he. The desert stretched for miles in every direction, endless waves of heat rising off the sand as the sun pounded down from above, but hidden beneath the cracked surface in a forgotten outpost carved into rock. Dr. Lewis stood over the queen once again, his hands stained with dust and alien blood, his heart pounding harder than ever before, knowing time was bleeding away faster than he could fight it. Guards had sealed the doors behind them, their weapons ready, their eyes sharp, but even they looked unsure now, unsure if they could hold off the traitors who had already set fire to their own walls to erase what they could not control. Queen lay on a narrow slab of stone, her body still, her skin glowing less and less, her breath falling into long pauses that made Lewis fear each one might be the last he watched her. Carefully knowing the swarm had begun its final stage, and when that ended she would be gone, and there would be no war to stop, no peace to protect, no voice strong enough to call back the chaos waiting in orbit. Dear Lewis reached into his old case, his fingers finding a vial hidden deep inside. One he had never meant to use again, one sealed after a council on Earth, banned it forever. He had kept it not as a weapon, not as a plan, but as a memory, a reminder of the line he had sworn never to cross again. But now there were no lines, only her life or her death. He held the vial up to the light, watching the thick golden liquid swirl like slow fire inside. It was not a cure, not truly. It was a risk so great that every patient who had taken it before either died or barely lived. But sometimes barely living was enough to stop something worse, and right now he needed anything that could give him a few more hours. A few more minutes to find something better. He looked at the queen, her lips cracked, her eyelids twitching, as if caught in a storm of dreams. And for the first time, she spoke without opening her eyes, a single word carried in a whisper that chilled the room. Mercy. He did not answer, he could not. Instead, he loaded the vial into an alien injector, carefully adjusting the settings, hoping the mix of human and alien tech would work, hoping the fluid would reach the swarm before it adapted again, hoping he would not kill her faster than the thing inside her already planned to. Guard stepped back as he knelt beside her, holding her wrist steady and placing the injector over the thin line of pulsing light beneath her skin. He closed his eyes for just a moment, then pressed the trigger. The hiss was quiet, the reaction was nothing. Body arched violently, the glow of her skin exploding into flashes of red and white and blue. Her mouth opened wide, as if to scream, but no sound came, only a burst of air so hot it made the nearest guard stumble back, clutching his face. The room shook as if something alive had just woken, something angry, something hungry. And then everything stopped. No movement, no breath, no glow, no heartbeat. Silence filled the air so deep it felt like drowning. Dear Lewis stared down at her unmoving body, the injector still in his hand, and his mind blank, his chest frozen. He thought he had failed. He thought he had killed the last chance for peace, the last good voice in a galaxy too loud was war. One of the guards stepped forward, slowly reaching for his blade, not to strike the doctor, but to end the queen's suffering before enemies could twist it into shame. But Dr. Lewis raised his hand and said, "Wait," sparklet. The air, then another tiny pulses began to ripple under her skin, the glow returning softer now but stronger each wave of light, followed by another, then another. Chest lifted once more. Then again, then steadier. The machines around them blinked to life, reading new numbers, reading life where there had only been death. She was alive, not healed, not saved, not safe, but alive. Dr. Lewis stood up slowly, wiping sweat from his face. His knees weak, his body heavy with what he had just done. He looked at the guards, and not with pride, but with purpose. There was still time to finish what they had started. There was still a way to win this war before it began, but before he could take another breath, the sound shook the outpost. A voice crackling through the old radio system, sharp and cold and clear, saying, They know where you are, saying they are coming with fire and fury, saying you will not leave the desert alive. Guards moved fast sailing doors, loading weapons, powering up shields that might not hold, but they did not leave the queen's side. They stood ready to die not because of loyalty to their empire, but because they had seen something impossible and now believed it could be. Real Dr. Lewis leaned close to her face, whispering something only she could hear, telling her to hold on, telling her not to let go, telling her this is not the end, not yet, not today. And then he picked up the blade of light, strapped it to his arm, and turned toward the door. They would come through. Smoke and shadow with guns and lies, but he would be waiting, and he would not run asterisk. Night had fallen over the desert like a heavy cloak, and the stars above blinked cold and silent as if they were watching the story unfold from afar too. Distant to help, too distant to care, and deep beneath the sand in the cracked stone of the old outpost, the queen opened her eyes and took her first real breath since the moment she collapsed. The air was thick with tension, and the scent of scorched circuits and dust filled the small room, where she lay surrounded by guards who stood like statues and machines that blinked softly like they were dreaming. Dr. Lewis sat beside her shoulders, low with exhaustion, his hands still shaking from what he had done, but his eyes were full of something else now, something fierce and calm and ready. Queen turned her head slowly, her gaze finding him in the low light, her voice rising like wind through glass, soft and sharp and full of weight as she spoke. Your name is Lewis, and he carried pain like armor. He nodded once, not knowing what to say, not trusting himself to speak because her voice was unlike anything he had ever heard. Not just sound, but memory and sorrow and fire all wrapped into a single breath. She asked how much time she had left, and he told her the truth, that he had slowed the swarm but not destroyed it, that the cure was not permanent, and the enemy who put it inside her would strike again soon and harder than before, that her life still hung by a thread, thinner than light itself. She did not flinch, she did not fear. She only asked if there was still hope, and he said yes, because he had seen her fight with nothing but a dying heart and a name on her lips, and because he had watched her blood burn like a star and still hold on. The queen sat up slowly, her body weak, but her will strong, and she looked around the room, then at the guards, and then at the walls, as if she could see beyond them, beyond the desert, beyond the stars, and she spoke again, saying, there is a traitor among us, one who walks with honor on his lips and poison in his hands, one who fears peace more than war and would rather burn the future than lose the past. She told them the name, a name that cracked a silence in the room like lightning across stone, a name that made the guards stiffen with rage and grief and disbelief, because it was someone close, someone high, someone trusted, someone who had stood beside her in public but planned her death in secret. The queen said he used ancient tech, long forbiddens, built in hidden labs buried beneath moons forgotten by maps. Machines meant for control, not healing, created to twist life into a tool and turn blood into chains. And he had sent that swarm into her during the council, masked as a gift of peace, hoping it would end her slowly before the truth could be found. Dear Lewis asked why he would do it, and she answered not with anger, but with sadness, because he believes war gives strength. Because he believes peace is weakness, because he cannot see the future, where species live without fear of each other, because he cannot rule unless others kneel. She looked at Lewis with eyes that shimmered like through water, and she said, you saved me not because you had to, not because you were ordered, but because you saw me as something worth saving, even when I was a stranger, and I will not forget that, and my people will not forget that. But then the ground shook, dust fell from the ceiling, and lights flickered as explosions echoed above them. Not close yet, but coming fast and closer with every second. The traitors' forces had found them, had breached the outer barrier, had come to finish what the swarm had started. Guards moved quickly, taking positions, readying weapons, sealing doors, while shouting reports across comes, their voices full of urgency, but also resolve, because now they had a reason to fight, a true reason. A queen reborn and a healer from Earth who had done what no one believed possible. Dear Lewis looked at the queen and asked if she could walk, and she stood without answering her, body trembling, her breath tight, but her steps sure and strong and proud as she said, we end this now, or we never will. They led her through narrow halls toward the last exit, a launch. Platform hidden beneath the stone, one last ship waiting with old engines and weak shields, but fast enough to break the blockade if launched at the right angle at the right moment, if luck and courage stayed close as they reached the door. Another blast shook the ground, louder, now closer, now the trader's voice echoing through the speakers, offering mercy if they surrendered, death if they resisted, lies wrapped in silk and steel. Queen stepped forward, placed her hand on the launch console, and turned to Lewis, saying, "This war will not be won with guns, but with truth. And if I fall, you must speak it. If I rise, you will be honored beyond time itself. Because you did not just save a life, you changed the world." The engines roared, the door opened, and the ship rose like a silver arrow through the night, and the stars watched again, but now they burned a little brighter, because the Queen had spoken and hope had found its voice. The ship soared through the dark, like a ghost wrapped in fire, cutting through enemy air with no shields, no weapons, no escort, just courage and speed and the hope that someone somewhere was still listening, that someone out there still believed. In what they were trying to do inside the cockpit, Dr. Lewis sat beside the Queen, his hands gripping the controls tighter than he ever thought possible, sweat on his brow, pounding not from fear, but from the weight of everything behind them, everything they had left behind in fire and betrayal and sacrifice. The Queen sat tall despite her pain, her eyes locked on the stars. Ahead, her breath steady, her voice calm as she gave directions to a secret channel, one used only by rulers, one that bypassed all fleets, all stations, all traps, and reached the core of the empire, where the throne waited, where the truth had to be spoken, behind. Then a dozen ships gave chase, silver daggers, cutting through the black sky, faster and faster. Every second closer with each breath, the enemy not stopping, not slowing their orders. Clear, destroy the Queen, destroy the human silence. The truth, before it takes root, before it reaches those who still dare to listen. The Queen looked at Lewis and said, "You must speak when the moment comes, not just as a healer, but as a witness, as a human who saved someone your kind was told to fear someone. Your kind was told to fight. You must speak not for me, but for every voice lost in silence and every life stolen in darkness." He nodded, though he did not feel ready. He nodded because something inside him had changed, not in a desert, not in a lab, but in a moment. He chose to help her when he had nothing to gain and no reason to trust, when he chose mercy over silence and action over fear. The console blinked, red warning lights flashed. The enemy ships had locked on the time for speeches had ended. Now was the time to act, to move, to risk everything for one final chance at peace. The Queen leaned forward and activated a crystal panel revealing a hidden route, a slingshot orbiter on the nearest moon, one that would take them straight into the throne chamber through an emergency gate opened only by the blood of a living monarch. Lewis flew the ship into the curve, his hands shaking as G-force pulled at his bones, as light bent around them and engines screamed louder than thunder. The hull groaned but held the moon past like a blur, and then the gate opened, a flash of white, brighter than anything he had seen, a doorway through reality itself. They vanished and appeared at the heart of the empire, a chamber of gold and light where thousands of alien leaders stood frozen in shock as the Queen's ship landed in the center of the hall, silent and scorched and broken, but whole. The hatch opened and smoke poured out, and then she stepped down, not carried, not helped, but walking, bruised and pale, but proud. And a live gasp echoed through the chamber. Ham's rose voices cried out, and then silence as she raised one arm and said, "I have returned not from weakness, but from betrayal, not by miracle, but by a human, a doctor from a world you called lesser, a man who saved me when our own turned away." She told them everything. She named the traitor. She revealed the swarm, the poison, the lies, the fear used to control them all. And she told them how one human stood against it with nothing but his will and his science and his kindness. And then she stepped aside and let him speak. Dia. Lewis stepped forward into a chamber not made for his kind, into the gaze of creatures who had once feared him, hated him, dismissed him, and he told them the truth in simple words, with no pride and no rage, only honesty. He told them what he saw in her blood, what he saw in their machines, what he saw in their fear. Told them peace is not weakness, and war is not strength, and trust is the only cure for what divides them. And when he finished, no one clapped, no one spoke, but one by one they knelt and the Queen walked to him and placed her crown in his hands and said, "You did not just save my life. You saved the future, and for that you are forever part of our people. Enemy ships stopped moving, the traitor was taken. The war was undone before. It began, and somewhere on Earth, far from stars and thrones, a signal was sent, a simple message from one world to another, a message that said, we are not alone and we are not enemies because of one human, because of one queen, because when death came, in silence they chose to speak.